السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسوله الكريم وبعد. One of the major themes of the Qur'an are the objectives, the maqasid. The maqasid are a major logic in the Qur'an, or the purpose, if you wish, thinking is the main mode of thinking really in the Qur'an. When you read the Qur'an, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the universe, He gives objectives. Why He created the mountains and the skies and the heavens, why He created us and the jinn, and why everything He subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about in the Qur'an is giving us an objective, a reason. And therefore the objectives are not a partial theme of the Qur'an. They actually represent everything in the Qur'an, because they are either stated as objectives with one of the tools that we know in the Arabic language of rationalization or reasoning, لعل, لام التعليل, etc. All of the Arabic tools that mean the reason, because, for the reason of, for the wisdom of, etc., etc. Or they are not stated like that, but they are obvious for those who reflect upon the Qur'an to see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala aims at particular objectives from the discourse itself in the Qur'an. And I mean the discourse in the divine way, not, of course, obviously in a cultural way. This is a revelation. And how the revelation is read is very important, and it's very important to read the purposes in the Qur'an. The Qur'an in that sense, because it focuses on the purposes and the objectives, is a very futuristic book, because every objective that you can come across is actually talking about achieving that objective in the future. Whether individually I would like to achieve the worship of Allah, I would like to achieve taqwa or heedfulness of Allah, I would like to thank Allah, I would like to achieve any of these objectives. Or as a community, we would like to be united, we would like to stand for the truth, we would like to witness upon mankind, etc. All of these objectives are actually looking into the future and encouraging us to plan and to try to see what tools can we follow in order for us to get to that future of achieving these purposes. Also, because purposes and objectives are deep in the logic of the Qur'an is a book of critical thinking. There is a why for everything. Why I pray, to remember Allah. And therefore, if I don't remember Allah enough while I'm praying, my praying is not valid, because I am not achieving the purpose of praying. Why do I fast? Because of taqwa and heedfulness, or fear. And taqwa is not just heedfulness or fear. Taqwa is a mixture of many things. This is a huge concept. We'll talk about concepts at some other episode. But because of the why thinking, the Qur'an is teaching us to be critical of ourselves and of the reality we look at. Because of the why thinking, the Qur'an is also a very practical book, because it doesn't give anything unless there is a benefit for us, maslaha, or common good, or practical good, really, for our hearts, and of course the major part of our existence, and for the society, and for earth, and for humanity, and so forth. It's a very practical book in that sense, because it has this theme of objectives. It's also a very holistic book, because once you talk about the purposes, the higher level of objectives, you're actually looking at the bigger picture. You're looking at how the system itself works in order for the objective to be achieved. And therefore, if you look at the objectives of the Qur'an, you will start to have this thinking of yours moving towards these very important methodological advantages, if you wish. It takes a lifetime, really, to look at the sub-themes of objectives. What are the objectives of the Qur'an? They are not 3 or 5 or 7 or 10, as some scholars had given us in the literature, and they are much higher than that. Yes, of course, we can select a few of them to be at the higher level of objectives, but in order to understand the objectives theme of the Quran, we need to draw a complex and highly interconnected web of meanings of these objectives, connecting themselves, leading to each other, and then circling back, and so forth. And there are so many dynamics in the objectives of the Quran, but we can think about a few of them just for a way of example in this series. If we look at humanity and the objectives, why humanity, as the Quran is teaching us, number one is to worship Allah. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I haven't created jinn and ins except for worshipping me, subhanahu wa ta'ala. Worship of Allah is something that every prophet had ordered his people first. It's the first order when you read from the beginning in Surah Al-Baqarah, يَا أَيُّهَا النَّاسُ اعْبُدُوا رَبَّكُمْ. It's a command, it's an objective, it's a major concept. Tawheedullah, the oneness of Allah, is tied to this and is leading to worshipping Allah. Al-Iman, belief, is leading to worshipping Allah. Taqwa, hatefulness or piety, leads to worship Allah. The thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala leads to worshipping Allah. Worshipping Allah is not just carrying rituals as in ibadat. This is a very cultural and small angle that we look at worshipping Allah from. But worshipping Allah is an objective. When you reach, then everything in your life is directed towards Allah, and everything in the collective life of a community is directed towards Allah. Not just our worship and what we do in the mosque, but what we do in the lab, and what we do in the business, and what we do in the street, and what we do with our families, and our sports, and our arts. Everything should be directed towards that objective of worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In those many ways and tools and means of reaching that level of worship, as I'm saying, thanking Allah and fearing Him and hoping in His mercy and so forth. Everything that we do leads to that objective. There is an objective for humanity to rectify earth, or to, we usually say reform, but rectify perhaps is a more accurate translation in the English language. Islahul ard. The islah, or the rectification of earth, in the Quran is a major objective and a major theme. And it's not only in the material rectification, of course it is a major part, but also the rectification in terms of morals and meanings. We cannot just maintain our material life on earth, hence rectifying the material side of our lives, but we mess up the balance as we do these days, and mess up the morality that we should have, so that earth is rectified. Part of al-fasad, or the mischief that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about in the Quran, which is the anti-objective of rectification, is for people to disbelieve in Allah, for people to be immoral about their conduct in life, for people to lie or to carry hypocrisy in their hearts. All of this, or to cut what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered us not to sever and not to cut. Family ties, relatives ties, neighbors ties. All of this the Quran is mentioning under the theme of al-ifsad of al-ard, or spreading mischief or corrupting the earth. And corrupting the earth goes as an antithesis of rectifying earth. It's a major objective, and we should follow all the tools in order for us to rectify earth. Saving lives and dignifying lives is a major objective in the Quran, and that includes dignifying our families and taking care of our children so that they can grow not just healthy in terms of their bodies, but also healthy in terms of their hearts. That form of dignifying the human being and saving their lives. And life is a concept that has to do also with the afterlife. In fact, the afterlife is the real life. That's one of the major concepts. We'll talk about concepts later. But saving lives is a major objective in the Qur'an. And it's a theme. It's a theme in many ways. When you look throughout the Qur'an, throughout the stories and the similes, throughout what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about this dunya or this life or the afterlife, you will see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is forbidding everything that compromises life. Not just murder, of course, it's a major crime, and one of the crimes that the Qur'an is telling us to take very seriously, but also how we can save lives in many ways. And saving lives of the people is tied to saving their minds and saving their intellect and saving their existence and their dignity. And dignity is not defined as a legal term in the Qur'an. It's defined much higher. This is a term of faith, not just a legal term. And it has major punishments for those who go against the human dignity. And it is actually a universal term that not only encompasses the current generation, but for the future generation. Something that the secular definitions of human dignity didn't even reach, except with, alternative theories and whatever, and postmodern theories in partialistic ways. But the basic objective of human dignity in the Qur'an and the saving of human lives and human dignity being part of a human life is a very comprehensive and holistic and, if you wish, progressive kind of concept that the Qur'an approaches in many ways in order to achieve this objective. The Qur'an also has objectives for the Ummah as part of the humanity in order to witness upon mankind what is good and what is evil, in order for the Ummah or community of Muslims, believers to be united and so forth. And if we look at the themes of the Qur'an this way, then we are able to discover meanings that are highly applicable in our lives. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow us this kind of knowledge. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.